Thank you, Yvonne and Greg. Always like to see you walk through the door with that guitar case.
It's a bass case, but that's okay.
Well, if that's the biggest mistake I make today, then I don't know. Probably the most memorable Mother's Day sermon that I've ever had was not memorable because of the sermon at all. I was up there preaching away, and all of a sudden people were starting to laugh, and you wonder, well, what's going on? Did I mangle some words or what? Finally, someone pointed, and I looked behind me, and they had the baptistry was up, and then there was a half wall about this high, and there was our cat walking back and forth. She had gotten into the church somehow, so maybe I should check for cats. I don't know. But anyway, today we are going to continue our study in the book of Ecclesiastes, and that we will be looking at life and death today. Part 10 of our study in Ecclesiastes. And here, those of you that are new, this is a wisdom book in the Old Testament, and it is the author looking at things under the sun. You see him talk about things being under the sun quite often, and he's looking at life as someone who's maybe not taking God into account, although sometimes he just can't help himself, and he does bring God into it, and we'll talk about that. But just maybe you have felt the same way that the author has, that you look around at life and you wonder, what is going on here? Why don't things make sense? Why do the wicked seem to prosper and the righteous just seem to have such a hard time? Why does this happen? Why do we face death? Why do we have all of these things? And that the author is perplexed about that as we go through his teaching here. If you will join me in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. He says, "But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise in their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner. And he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. Again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those of knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time, like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare. So the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard. The words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. And may God add blessing to the reading of his word. Father, thank you for your word today, and may your Spirit help us apply it to our hearts, and may it lead us to trust you the author of life, the one who has it all planned out, that even when we don't understand, we know you do. We pray these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. So we come to the first enigma that our author here is talking about, is that death comes to all. That he's looking is like, well, does it matter how you live your life because we're all going to the same place, is the perplexity that he is looking at. And he said that he examined all this, he laid it to heart, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. So he said, I'm looking around and I see that the righteous, the wicked, they're in the hand of God, or the righteous are in the hand of God, rather, and that God is there with them, their deeds are there. But he said, whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. And so just like we don't know what the future may hold, we don't know what will come our way. And just because if you are a Christian does not mean life is going to be rosy. It doesn't mean life is going to be easy and that you will always have money in your bank account, that you can send your kids to the Ivy League college, you can drive a Cadillac, and all of those things. That being a Christian doesn't guarantee that. In fact, sometimes being a Christian can mean the opposite. Look at the life of the Apostle Paul. That he was going about establishing churches, he was preaching the gospel in places that had never heard of the gospel. And did he have it easy? Not at all. He was stoned, which was the way of execution in Jewish areas in that time. So they'd pick up rocks and throw them at you until they thought you were dead. And they thought he was dead and he wasn't. He was shipwrecked, he was beaten with rods, he was whipped, he was in prison, which prisons today aren't easy. Prisons then were really tough. You had to have friends that would even bring the food because, well, they didn't give it to you, you were just held there. And so he really had a rough life, yet he knew it was worth it. He trusted God through that. But we don't know what life will bring. We don't know what may come. He said, it is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner. He who swears is he who shuns an oath. And so he's saying, I've looked around and I've seen people that they seem to do everything right. And well, yeah, they still face death at the end of their life. And people that do everything wrong, and we think, well, God should just take care of them right now, and they might live a good long life, but yet the end is still there. The end is still that they will end up in death. But he says, this is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion, for the living know that they will die. But the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. And so he's going on here saying that, well, living is to be preferred over death, and I think we'd all agree. And they looked at two different animals. One, we still call the lion the king of beasts. I just got to take some kindergartners to the zoo on Friday. And so we were there and we got to see the baby giraffe, and boy, wasn't it cute. And then you go, and it was a hot day, so the lions were up on their rock, just laying there. But there you had three of the king of beasts right there. And they are impressive animals. Not something you'd want to meet without the 3 inches of glass between you and them. And here he is saying that lions, they were revered. Dogs were not. We like dogs nowadays. They're cuddly, they're loyal, love you. We just really love our dogs. In that society, they were just roving packs of scavengers that ate the garbage, and they were not looked on. So to put it in our way of saying, maybe we would say better is a living skunk than a dead lion. We might look at it, most people don't like skunks, or snakes, or some animal that we don't like. But here he's saying it's better to be alive, even if you aren't liked, than to be dead. And said that madness is in their hearts, that the children of man are full of evil. And I think we see that if you flip on the news, there's not too many good people out there. That lots of bad things happen. And if we look at our own hearts, we realize that, we would like to think of ourselves as good people, but if we really look deep down inside, we see, oh boy, that we don't measure up. In fact, Paul talked about that in the book of Romans, that universally we don't measure up. If we look in Romans chapter, find it here, Romans chapter 3, and I've looked too far. And he is going on here in starting in verse 9 about no one being righteous. He says, what then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all, for we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin. As it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside, together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. And so Paul here establishes that every one of us deserves God's wrath. And that's hard to take. We don't want to think of ourselves that way, but every one of us does. Every one of us has broken God's law. Every one of us deserves for God to judge us. But that's not the end of the story. That is why God sent Jesus, because not a one of us, as Paul said, can be justified by works of the law. And what that means is none of us can stand before God's throne when he is in judgment and say, well, look at my list of good things I have done. And God will say, oh, that's impressive. Yes, you have earned your spot in heaven. None of us can do that. All of us deserve God's wrath. But that is why Jesus came. Jesus, who was God for all eternity, took on human flesh, was born as a baby in Bethlehem, lived a perfect life and never sinned once, and then he died upon the cross to pay the penalty for sin, so that all who come to him and believe will be saved. They will be forgiven of their sin. He says, you must believe. It's not that we can earn it, but we must believe in what Christ has done. Believe that he is who he said he is, and believe that he paid the penalty on the cross. And there, the writer of Ecclesiastes, of course, this was before Christ came. So he looks and sees, well, you have good people and bad people, but deep down I think we know, I know I don't belong to that category of good people. And I'm sure if you look deep down in your heart, you'd see, I don't either. But that is why Jesus came. And he said here going on that the dead know nothing, they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. And here he's looking at things under the sun. So he's not talking about any sort of afterlife in heaven or anything like that. He's saying this is how it looks to us on earth. That once you're dead, that's it. And that there's no more memory, and eventually that memory fades. And so, how can we live in light of that, knowing that that is what is coming? And he was perplexed at that. But he didn't know about what Christ would do. He didn't know all that was coming. So we need to not ignore the fact of death. Know that it's coming, but be ready for death. And how are we ready? Just like I said, you know Jesus Christ. Have you trusted in him? Because if you have, then you will have a home in heaven. And death will just be falling asleep here and waking up in heaven. Not something to be feared and to find revolting, but find what God has done. To find the promise that he has done. But then he goes on, and you think, well, boy, he's getting awful depressing. Well, here he goes on, well, how should we live? How should we live? Well, starting in verse 7, he says, go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. And so here he's saying, enjoy what God has given you. And in their society, they grew grain, so to eat your bread with a merry heart was to enjoy the food God has given you. God gave you a harvest, and hey, you're enjoying the bread that God has given you. They grew grapes, and so he's saying enjoy the wine that was made with the grapes there. That God has given it to you, enjoy it. Now that doesn't mean overindulgence. The Bible clearly condemns drunkenness. But what it's saying is that we accept it as a gift. It doesn't become that idol in our life, and that is what being an alcoholic is all about. That it's so much it becomes a chemical dependency, and your life revolves around that drink. But what he is saying here is enjoy the gifts God has given you. Enjoy what God has given you. Let your garments be always white. They would wear black, for mourning, so let your garments be white. Make sure they're clean and all of that. That's a good thing. But also in the hot sun, would you rather be wearing black or white? I think I'd rather be wearing white. And that society says, hey, wear your white garments. Don't always go around in mourning. Let not oil be lacking on your head. That it was such a dry climate there, you would use oil in your hair to help moisturize skin and all of that. We don't do that as much today. We have shampoo and conditioner and those sorts of things. But he's saying, anoint your head and, take care of yourself. Don't go around always in mourning. Also enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun. Because that is your portion in life and in your toil, and that you toil under the sun. So enjoy family life. Take time to have time with your wife. Take time for those special times. And men, I'd say it's a great idea to take your wife out on a date. Just because you're married doesn't mean you can't do that anymore. Treat her special. Enjoy your time together. And enjoy the gift God has given you, which is marriage. It's a gift from God. And that it is something God has given us, and that we should enjoy that. He says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no word or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. And there, Sheol is the Hebrew word that just means the grave or death or all of that. So he says, when you find something to do, do it. You don't know the future. You don't know what's coming. So if an opportunity comes your way, do it. Just like this year, I bet farmers felt like as soon as that opportunity came that the soil was ready for planting, you better get out on that tractor and plant the corn, because, boy, we don't know when that window's going to close and you can't do it. You just got to get out and do it. And so he's saying to enjoy the life God has given you. To find enjoyment in those small things. Will your life have trouble? Yeah. But can you find things to enjoy? Yeah, you can find that too. So enjoy the life God has given you. And live while you can. Live while you can. And trust God in this life. Live this life. And try to live life to its fullest here. While keeping in mind this life comes from God. That it is a gift from God. And next we come to wisdom is good. Said, again, I saw that under the sun, race is not to the swift. You were just at the track meet, and sometimes you can look at the records and see, wow, this kid won every single 100-meter dash he did, and he's got the best time. And that gun goes off, and they start running, twist his ankle. Well, sometimes the race isn't to the swift. That does happen. Nor the battle to the strong. Sometimes you'll have a humongous army and going against some foe, and boy, they tricked you out and they just found a way to defeat you or to not be where you thought they would be. Sometimes the battle doesn't go to the strong. Nor bread to the wise. So sometimes just being wise doesn't mean you're going to be well fed or anything like that. Nor riches to the intelligent. Well, sometimes you can have someone very, very intelligent and they may not make much. And someone who's not very intelligent, and they have a whole bunch. Sometimes that happens. Nor favor to those with knowledge, but a time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time. And so he's saying here, time happens, chance happens. We don't always know what this life will bring. Now, wisdom is a good thing to have, but it's not a guarantee. It's good to have wisdom, just like if you go to your retirement planner and they're going to invest your money for you. You hope they know what they're doing. But just because they know what they're doing doesn't guarantee that your investments are going to grow at a certain rate. It just doesn't guarantee it. And they'll tell you right in there, it's like, well, past performance is no guarantee of future performance. We don't know when a crash is going to happen or anything like that. And so you just try the best you can. But he compares the people to fish and birds. He says, like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. And so he compares life happening just like if you're out fishing and the fish is swimming along, it doesn't know what's going on. And until the fisherman sees it, throws out the net, and boom, it's caught. It was swimming along just fine, and boom, right into a net. Or a bird that is caught in a snare. You know, you set a trap for the bird, and it thinks everything's great, it lands, and boom, it's caught. And life can happen to us that way, that we are going along thinking, hey, everything is great, life is just going along great, and all of a sudden, boom, something hits you. And that could happen with anything. And I think the examples are, you know, there's a whole bunch of examples out there. I'm sure it's happened in your life. Everything seems to be going great, and then boom, something happens. It says, I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. And so you get this idea of this tiny city, and this great king with a huge army comes, surrounds it, builds siege works against the wall. They're getting ready to take this little city. It says, but there was found in it a poor, wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. And so this poor man, he was wise, he had a good idea, and the writer doesn't tell us what it was, but somehow through his wisdom, he delivered the city, and after it was all done, everybody forgot about him. He went back to being poor and probably being looked down on, and there's that poor guy, I don't want anything to do with him, even though he saved the city. It says, but I say that wisdom is better than might, though a poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. And so he said, well, you know, wisdom is better than might in a lot of ways, but sometimes it still doesn't get you very far. Just like that poor man, he delivered his city, and they still didn't like him. They still didn't revere him or anything. And we find a similar story without the forgetting in 2 Samuel 20, 16 to 22, of the little city of Abel. And that the force of Joab came against it because he was going to destroy the city because a rebel went and hid in the city. And so they surrounded the city. And finally, an old woman gets up on the wall, and she cries out to their commander and said, well, you know, it's been said that people come to Abel for wisdom, so please tell me, what is going on? I said, well, we're seeking this one rebel, and he is hiding out with you guys. You're protecting him. He says, well, oh, really? Who is he? And told him, okay. And so they handed him over. In fact, I think they may have just went ahead and took care of him there in the city and showed him, yep, we took care of him. He's dead, and saved the city in that way. He says, the words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. And so usually we might think of kings as they are great and grand. He said, well, you know what? Better is hearing whispered wisdom in the quiet than a king who's a fool shouting at other fools. You know, who wants to hear that? Nothing good's going to come out of that. So wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. And so while wisdom can be such a great thing, it doesn't take much to ruin it. Maybe you remember back to your school days when one Yahoo in the class would ruin it for everybody. Now, it didn't take much, but that would happen sometimes, that, you know, everybody else was being good, but because this one guy had to go and do something, now we're all suffering for it. Well, that does happen. And it can even happen on bigger scales, that things are going well, but one sinner destroys much good. You know, we even think back to the 1960s that, we had the President JFK, and, I wasn't alive then. Maybe things were going good, maybe they weren't. But that one sinner of Lee Harvey Oswald sure upended a lot of that. It doesn't take much sin to ruin things. You see, wisdom, there we go. Wisdom is helpful. It can be helpful. It's good to have wisdom in life. But wisdom is not a guarantee of success. So we try and do the best we can, but wisdom's not a guarantee. But knowing Christ and His promises brings us hope for the future no matter what our present circumstances. So if you know Christ, if you have put your trust in Him, if your mind is set on eternity, not present circumstances, then you can endure this life knowing that, well, you know what? It's going to be better. It's going to be better when I am with my Lord in glory. It is going to be better when I know Him. And so, while we may sometimes feel perplexed, like the author of Ecclesiastes, we may sometimes feel like, man, this life doesn't make sense. But we know the one that it makes perfect sense to. We know that God has it figured out. We know that He has a plan. We know that He loves us. And that if we have put our faith in Him, that we have a future with Him. And knowing that, we can endure the foolishness of this world. Knowing Christ, we can endure much here. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your words you have given us. And Father, I pray that we would trust Christ, that we would trust Him for salvation, that we would trust Him also that He holds the future in His hands, that He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, and that He loves us, and that You love us. And Father, may we trust what You are doing in our lives, even when it doesn't make sense. And it is in the name of Jesus that we pray.